So I've only been on this team for about 3 months, and I've noticed something really interesting. Of all the complaints we get for, the ones for justice, for our hotline, this is one of the biggest things we hear about. People ripped off by roofers, and they have no idea what to do afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's really common with all the hailstorms and the wind. I think that people are just too fast to believe someone, maybe. I mean, they kind of come through, like after every storm, they will go door knocking. And yeah, we get a ton of, roofs and contracting work in general, where it's either terribly done or they take the money and they don't come back.
An attorney that we interviewed for this story brought up a really interesting point, and it's that people know that the regulations in Texas are lax, especially when it comes to roofing, and that's why the scammers will come to Texas after a big weather event, because they know they can get away with it. And I thought that was a really interesting way to describe it, because it's like almost Texas is on display. Come here because you know you can manipulate people. And I just don't know if that's a reputation the state wants to have, or how lawmakers feel about that reputation.
Yeah, I guess it's not really a secret about how lax it is here. I mean, Texas is generally, low regulation, so I guess it shouldn't come as a surprise. But yeah, lawmakers, they've taken this up, I don't know, we found in the last decade, so the last 5 years. Legislative sessions, some form of regulation or licensing or registration, something like that has come up, but it's died in every session for 10 years.
And this was an ambitious project, I think, because this preceded even me getting here, and I want to give you the due credit you deserve. You started this and reaching out to every single legislator, at least incumbents, coming in this session.
Yeah. We had the talk in August and kind of decided we're gonna set up 4 questions. We wanted to make it even across the board, ask every state lawmaker, every representative, every senator the same 4 questions. That way people can kind of go and compare, it's apples to apples. But yeah, we started reaching out to them in September, and at the time, a coworker had actually told me, you're never going to get answers. Like, they're never going to answer you. And I was like, well, no, we're giving them plenty of time, and these are kind of simple questions. It's an issue.
We have to hold them accountable. Yeah,
right.
That's their job.
Yes, it's an issue. They're lawmakers. Possible law. Yes, they'll say something. And yeah, no, by and large, ignored by most of the lawmakers in Texas.
It's crazy, and I remember my first week when I started here, I started helping you, reaching out to these lawmakers, and I think I got answers from fewer than a handful, whatever a handful may be, 3 or 4. We actually got more responses from people who are incoming after the election. People maybe who want to get on the right foot and say something one way or the other, and we weren't looking for particular responses. That's not our job.
Right.
I think what was really shocking is how few people even responded, period. We were talking, what was it, like 60% never even acknowledged that we reached out.
Well, yeah, and the trouble with that is you don't want to send an email off and then just never hear back from anyone. I didn't want to hear after we ran this story that, oh, I never received your email. I had no idea. Of course, I would love to answer. Right. Yeah, exactly. So after the first round of emails went out, we waited 3 weeks. We'd given them about 3 weeks to answer 4 questions. Immediately, some of them got back to me and were like, oh, I'm busy traveling. And I'm like, well, you have email where you are, right? So please just take the time to answer these 4 questions for your constituents.
And they're easy questions too. They were yes or no for the most part.
Right.
We weren't asking for a novella or some draft of legislation. Do you support this legislation? Do you not? What protections could you envision? I think that was the most expansive question we asked.
Yeah, no. And so after so much time goes by and you don't hear from anyone, we started calling them and emailing again. Hey, just like making sure you saw this email, that you have this, not that it didn't just go anywhere. And even still, after multiple calls to the district office, to the Austin office, re-emailing, at a certain point I got to where I was emailing the same people, and it would be the 3rd forward, and I'd say, please, I would love to stop bothering you.
Please,
just tell me, just acknowledge this email.
Right.
And even then, like, radio silence.
And I think that's just part of the job, right? It's like we have to keep trying. I don't want anybody at the end of any of our investigations to say we didn't try, we didn't reach out. I'd rather be
the annoying person.
The annoying person than like the negligent person, right? Or the negligent reporter.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to lose sight of what we're talking about here, especially when we're, we compiled this spreadsheet and people are thinking about it in terms of legislation, but really what this affects is people. Forget even the roofs, forget what they're asking for. At the end of the day, this is about consumer protections and people having recourse when they get ripped off, and we've heard from so many of those people.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, and I think for a lot of people, I came to this story thinking about it as just a constituent, and I was like, oh, well, I wonder what my lawmakers think. And so I think that anyone has the right to know where your representative stands on an issue. And that's kind of where I came from on this. When somebody said you're not going to be able to get answers, I'm like, well, they should answer. They should say something.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the people, I mean, who have been affected by this. I mean, like that lady that you interviewed who had to redo her own roof.
It's the craziest thing I ever heard. I mean, we've done, I'm sure in some variation, this story before, right? Someone gets ripped off by a roofer, they don't know what to do, but I've never heard this take on it. Ms. Johnson was saying that she went through the whole rigmarole, right? She paid the money, the roofers came to her house, they stripped her roof, they took off every single shingle, and then they left it there. And, a week goes by, it's almost Thanksgiving, they're having people over, and she finally says, you know what, I'm gonna do it myself. And I really appreciated her tenacity, but it shouldn't come to that. It shouldn't have to be to the point where you're on YouTube looking up ways to do a roof when you've never held a hammer in your life, and it's on you. And that's a quote from her. She's like, I've never had to hammer in a nail before, and yet she's on her roof picking out shingles that she had from Home Depot, trying to figure out what goes where. The scary thing is, in the state of Texas and in the eyes of Texas, she is just as qualified as any Joe Schmo who comes up and pretends to be a roofer.
Right, and she can do that to anybody. She could go to anybody's house at this point. She's learned it on YouTube.
And no one has any sort of recourse, if she were to mess up their roof. The funny thing is, though, and I'm not a professional, but I did look at her roof. Pretty good job for a first timer. I was very impressed, and she had a great sense of humor about it, but it's also really sad. I think that she felt, and she said this, I had no one to turn to. No one would help me. And it's not about, I think a lot of people make the argument regulations are onerous, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, this woman felt alone and like she could do nothing about her situation.
Well, and what was the deal there? Was it that he had taken the money and she didn't have any money to pay anybody else? Is that why she had to do it that way?
She paid $6 grand and then he just never came back.
But I mean, she didn't have any, you can't go and find, oh, okay, I lost $6,000 to that guy. Let me go find another roofer who will do it better. I mean, I'm assuming she didn't have.
I think it was at that point a cash flow issue too, where they were trying to save money and mitigate costs. But then you think about it, all that money they spent at Home Depot, I mean, I think they ended up paying upwards of $7-8 grand in total between her shingles and the shingle, the work that was supposed to be paid for. So it's just unfortunate all the way around, and she's just one of the many faces on this story, and we've talked to so many people. I think in our story we didn't have time for all of them. We peppered them throughout the story of this person had this happen, that person had it happen. It is the same thing over and over again.
And it's hard to talk to those people because I feel bad for them, and you want to get their story out there, but so many times when we come out there and we interview, they think that we're going to be able to track this guy down and make him give the money back.
They're gone.
I mean, it's hard because you have to tell them, we'll put it out there, we'll try, but
and that's the problem. It's that they're not registered. Their name isn't in any sort of database. So even if we tried as hard as we could, it's almost impossible to track these people down if they're operating under an alias and they're working out of state. And I think that's something that this new legislation aims to do. They want to be able to register the names of roofers and put it in a database for consumer transparency. So, if you or I want to get our roof done, we can look up the company and say, oh, okay, they're based out of, this town in North Texas, and I can verify that they've done work before, but now it's anybody's guess.
And something that stuck out to me in the lawmaker responses that we did get when we asked, the very last question was, what's your advice to someone who's been ripped off? And a lot of them said, file charges or contact the DA, call the police. But so many people do that and they're told that it's a civil matter. And then some of them say, well, okay, file a civil case. I mean, then you're talking about more money to go to small claims court to maybe track down someone. I mean,
maybe.
If the court can't serve that person, if you can't find that person, what makes you think the court's going to?
Right.
You know, so it's just, it's aggravating all around, I'm sure, for anybody that's been ripped off in that kind of way.